Hello there everybody, Sam's Trains here and welcome back to the railway. Today we're going to find out whether after all these years Heljan can finally redeem themselves on that awful Tango loco. 6 years ago, back in 2018, I bought and reviewed this, the infamous Heljan Class O2 Tango. And my review of this loco became pretty infamous because of how terrible this model was. And at the time, in 2018, the retailers really struggled to shift these. So I ended up buying this for just £89, which was better than half price. Now at the time, this I think was the worst model I'd ever purchased. It had a really poor quality, almost rubbery looking plastic finish. It arrived in very poor condition with missing front handrails and copious visible glue fingerprints all over the bodywork. The wheels looked unrealistic with their shiny unpainted axles, plus visible unblackened pickups on show as well. There was a very poor finish on the whistle and safety valves, just a strange colour on those really, and a poor quality mechanism too, given how costly the model was at its full price, with no separate bearings on its driving axles, etc. Well, 6 years on and these models are back with a new RRP of £219 or £186 at the retailers. That is more than double what I paid for the awful one about 6 years ago. So I have decided to pick up a new Heljan Tango, against my better judgment really, and here it is. Now this is not just a straightforward re-release of an old model. Heljan have partially retooled this to allow for this earlier Great Northern version to be produced, which I'm looking forward to seeing, and apparently other upgrades and improvements have been made as well. I'm not exactly sure what those are, but hopefully they will be improvements to the sort of feature set and also the mechanism of this model. And having paid almost £190 for this new model, to say my expectations are high is an absolute understatement. I am really hoping to see this model entirely transformed for that amount of money. I was cross enough with the old one at £89. If this one is as bad or anything close, I'm going to be really quite fuming about this, I think. But hopefully Heljan will have redeemed themselves with this. Hopefully this will be the model that the original model should have been. And hopefully I'll be able to give this a decent score. But anyway, if you're interested in picking one of these up, I don't know if I recommend that yet, I do have affiliate links down in the description, and I also want to say a thank you to Rails of Sheffield for getting this delivered to me as quickly as they could. I know it's busy for them at the moment. But anyway, let's finally lift the lid on this thing and find out whether Heljan have been able to fix it. And I have to say things are looking good from outside the box. It seems a bit more effort has been put into the packaging because we've got a nice drawing of the loco on the front. And I have to say the weight of the box does feel pretty good. The old loco wasn't dreadfully light, although it did have a sort of purely plastic body, I believe. I'm not really expecting that kind of upgrade on this, but hey, I am open to being surprised. Anyway, let me show you the end of the box. So the version I went for was 3930. It is the Great Northern Lined Grey 02/1. I believe the 02 I looked at last time was the 024. It's a 280 number 477 with the Great Northern High Cab and Tender. I think those are new tooled aspects of this. It's DCC ready with a 21-pin socket. It does have sprung buffers, NEM couplers, sound ready, so maybe that means that there are pre-fitted speakers in these models now, and it is Era 2. And I think that's pretty much all there is to see on the box, so let's open this for the first time. I have saved the unboxing so that I'm doing it on camera for the first time. So let's take a look. All right, we've got a manual. Let's take a look at this then, and hopefully someone at Heljan will have actually proofread this so that it's free of all the usual mistakes. So let's see whether that's true. Okay, so prototype specification, little bit about the loco there, plus a class history, which is nice to see. So pause and read that if you'd like to. Here we've got some info on body removal, and actually this looks pretty good. The photos are in focus, which makes a nice change, and it does look as though the drawbar, well, more specifically the wires, have been altered. There was an interesting sort of connector which was still a little bit messy on the original. This one looks as though the wires have just got sort of standard heat shrink tubing holding them together. The DCC socket is in the tender. There you can see what goes on inside there. And yes, there is a factory fitted speaker here. You can see that on the left of the drawing there. Accessing the motor then, to gain access to the locomotive chassis for maintenance, loosen 2 screws, so screw at the front, screw at the back, and there we have, yeah, what looks like the same mechanism as before. So motor, little flywheel built into it, maybe the flywheel's new, can't remember. To be fair though, I didn't really have any problems with the way the original Tango ran, so that shouldn't be an issue. And then on the back, we've got tech data. So apparently this has a 5-pole motor, which is good. It has 2 brass flywheels. Again, I don't remember there being 2 before, so maybe that is an upgrade. Wiper pickups on 8 driving wheels and 6 tender wheels, so it's nearly all-wheel pickup. That's pretty good. More stats, even the dimensions, which is cool. Oh, I suppose this is the page I should have showed to start with. But yeah, it's just the sort of generic info. And then we've got the exploded diagram, which is pretty well presented, actually. It's well labelled, so you can actually tell what all the parts are. Yeah, a very, very competent manual. Things are looking good from the start. I mean, that's before we've seen the loco, but yeah, first impressions, definitely positive. Okay, let's have our first look at this loco, and I'm hoping the livery will be quite striking. Here we go. Gosh, look at that. So there was nothing like this with the first batch. I never saw anything other than black, actually, for the first batch of Tangos. So the fact that we've got this early Great Northern version in the photographic grey was very exciting to me, and I knew straight away that I would have to try it. Let's hope that was not a mistake. Right, nothing else in the pack. Oh my goodness. Please take care when handling your Heljan O2 model. Please be aware that this highly detailed, ready-to-run model features hundreds of individual parts. Okay. Alright, yeah, there's nothing unusual about this. I think the same is true of every model. So as long as you're taking a reasonable amount of care, things should be fine. With the previous model, it was already destroyed before I opened the box, so no amount of care could have saved that one. Hopefully this one will be a little bit better. Let's put that to one side. Right, accessories then. What do we have here? Not a whole lot for you to fit yourself, actually. We've got a pair of NEM tension locks and what looks like some screw link couplings for the buffer beams. So that means those haven't been fitted as standard, which is good because I believe the original model did have them fitted as standard and they tended to interfere with the NEM couplings. So yeah, probably quite good that those are not pre-fitted. Right, let's take our first look then at the finish. I'm hoping this is going to be dramatically better than on the original model because the finish was very unrealistic on that. Okay. Oh, this opens up a little differently. Pops open at the sides. So well packaged as well, that's another thumbs up. Right, I think we're ready. Okay, removing plastic. Yeah, not bad, not bad. So we've got a fairly satin sheen. It's most notable on the smoke box, I suppose. So they haven't gone to the trouble of making that a matte finish smoke box, which I suppose is a pity, but that's all right. One thing that does look dramatically better than I remember is the coal load. In fact, is that a crushed coal load? Yeah, I've actually, look at this. I shouldn't have done it, but just for demonstration purposes, I've managed to break a bit of it off. So I think that's the first time I've ever seen this on a ready-to-run model. I don't know if it's real crushed coal, but it's not just a moulded piece that fits in. It is some sort of ground-up material that's been glued in place. That is awesome. I did not realise they'd done that. Okay, things are looking a lot better. I'm enjoying this, actually, which is not something I could ever have said for the original model. Okay, lifting. Okay, so the weight is good. I don't think the loco body is die-cast. I don't think there's any metal on the running plate, but there's obviously a very hefty chassis in the loco and also in the tender because that's pretty heavy as well. In terms of the way the loco looks on first glance, yeah, there's still a few issues. I can't tell whether the running plate is perfectly straight, so we'll figure that out later on. The cab is certainly on the wonk though. Yeah, that's not great. Hopefully I'll be able to just sort of reposition that slightly and that will be better. So not entirely perfect, but certainly, well, I'm not seeing anywhere near the number of issues I saw on the last version of this I looked at. So I think generally speaking, I feel a little bit more confident about this one. But anyway, we'll take a much closer look and I'll get back to you on that. For now, first of all, let's have a bit of background on these locos in real life. The Class O2 was introduced to the Great Northern Railway to the design of Sir Nigel Gresley in 1918 for freight work. The nickname Tango came about as a result of the tango style of dancing, which apparently became popular at the same time as these locos were introduced in Britain. Now, that makes no sense to me whatsoever, so there must be more to it than this. I would guess maybe they were rough riders, perhaps they shook crews around, made them feel like they were doing the tango. Yeah, I'm not too sure. If you know, let me know. Anyway, almost 70 of these locos were built in total by both the Great Northern and later the LNER. These locos used 3 cylinders at a time when most 280 locos used just 2, allowing for smaller cylinders to be used without any reduction in power. The smaller and lighter cylinders experienced far less wear than the much larger cylinders that had to be used in 2-cylinder engines. Otherwise, the design was very similar to Gresley's previous 2-cylinder 01 locomotives, which were introduced in 1914. From 1923, the class became part of the LNER, who built new members of the class. This led to a number of Class O2 subclasses, ranging from the O2/1, those were the early examples built by the Great Northern, to the O2/2 and 3, built by the LNER with some modifications, and finally the O2/4, which was a rebuild of the class with new boilers and smoke boxes. This model, like I say, represents a Class O2-1 as seen on the Great Northern Railway. Despite a healthy number of these being produced, sadly no Class O2s remain today under preservation. Every example was withdrawn and scrapped between the late 1940s and 1963, and not even a single 01 survives under preservation either. So there she is up close and personal for you, the O2-1 as newly released by Heljan, and the verdict is in. And I can reveal that this is dramatically better than the O2 I looked at all those years ago. It's still not great, it's not the best model I've ever seen, and there are parts of it that are still bafflingly bad, and I just can't understand how they can justify such a high price for this. But generally speaking, it is much better, and would I still say this is one of the worst models I've ever seen? No, it's definitely not that bad. So I think we'll start with the negatives and then we'll get on to the positives a little bit later on. So the first negative for me is the plastic body construction. I just can't understand how a loco in 2024 that costs nearly £190 discounted can still have a plastic body. I don't mind plastic bodies, but I do expect that to be reflected in the price, and I don't expect to pay £190 anymore for locos with plastic bodies. Now, to be clear, I'm not complaining about that because of the weight, because this loco is very, very heavy. The instructions claim that this weighs 485 grams. Well, that's incorrect. I think we've established in the past that Heljan scales don't work, and they still don't. That is an exaggeration. In reality, this weighs 475 grams, which is 10 grams less than described, and almost 20 grams lighter than the previous O2 Tango I reviewed. But it's still quite a lot for something this size, and in fact that's a few grams heavier than Hornby's new 9F, which did have a die-cast body. So yeah, the weight of the model is absolutely fine. Less fine though is the state of the running plate. Yeah, plastic running plate, and it is quite visibly not straight. So yeah, I don't get that. If they've upgraded this model, if it's got a new price of, well, over £200 RRP, why has it still got such a flimsy running plate look? Look how easily it moves. Yeah, it's flimsy. That really could have done with being made of metal, because that warped look is not great. Also, in places the moulding isn't brilliant. The cylinders here I believe are die cast, but as you can see on the right hand side, some of the rivets just haven't come out at all. Could be a moulding issue, could be a painting issue, I suppose. Not entirely sure, but yeah, for such an expensive model, that's not great. And there are other components that don't look very good either. I mean, the chimney is a really, really messy part. It was before, still is now. Pity that not all of the issues could have been sorted. Yeah, the cab is not brilliant either. I've straightened it, as you can see, but yeah, it's not secure. It doesn't sort of sit properly. Again, I'm not entirely sure why this is fitted so loosely. We've also got the glazing. Can you see what's wrong with this? Yeah, why is it not transparent? It's barely even translucent. So yeah, the issue with that is obvious, but I will state the obvious just to be clear. Yeah, the windows are here for visibility. If they're sort of frosted like that, then they're not fit for purpose. So yeah, I've never seen a manufacturer get this wrong. I'm not sure how Heljan have managed it, but yeah, windows not great. We've got kind of flashing on the outside, and the glazing's not even flush to the cab either. It actually protrudes out the front, which doesn't seem like it can be right. So yeah, not brilliant glazing. And then we've also got sort of holes in the front of the cab where later versions of the O2 would have components fitted, but this one doesn't. Obviously, this is so that the tooling suite can produce as many different models as possible, but for this Great Northern version, it does mean we've got these unsightly holes in the front of the cab. Again, seems a little bit dodgy for such an expensive model. On the plus side though, a lot of my old grievances with the O2 have been solved. So the finish I think is definitely a lot better. It's got a less plasticky finish to it, doesn't look quite as rubbery and nasty. That's much, much better. I do wish that the smoke box could have received a matte effect. Again, that's not much of a costly feature to add, and I think it would have made this look a lot better, again, given the price. But we do have a massive improvement to the safety valves and whistles. The safety valves now have a turned metal finish to them, a kind of brass finish, whereas before it looked like, well, I think they were metal, but they'd been painted. The whistle is just plastic, but the choice of paints on there is definitely not too bad. Also, the handrails have now been painted. With the previous model, they were kind of bare metal and they were really shiny. That just didn't look right for a freight locomotive to me. The fact that these have been painted so that they sort of match the body colour, I think looks a lot better. And the great thing about these handrails is they're all here. The front handrail was entirely missing on my original model. I can't remember whether I ever found it, but this one's here. We've also got metal handrails on the side of the cab. These are not just moulded plastic parts, they are separately fitted, which is great. Decoration wise, I also love the banding. This has been done extremely well, and I should say the livery is just gorgeous. I think that has definitely warmed me up to this model as well. Yeah, fantastic photographic grey. Gorgeous lining on the side of the cab, as you can see, and the running number here has been very, very nicely applied. We've also got the side of the warped running plate, which has been sort of painted and lined. That looks great. On the side of the smoke box, we have what I assume is going to be a little builder's plate. Actually, to say how small that print is, there's a lot of detail to that, which looks fantastic. Here's a look at the front buffer beam. I guess we'll do all of this now. So yeah, nicely painted. The buffers are made of metal, not plastic, and they are sprung, as you can see. I do think it's good that the front screw link coupling hasn't been fitted so as not to foul the front NEM pocket. But the vacuum pipe is certainly going to be in the way of that, isn't it? So yeah, again, not that well thought out. I would suspect that you're going to have to trim the bottom of this vacuum pipe if you're going to want to use the front NEM coupling. The rear one, I would guess, is going to be okay. Yeah, the pipe doesn't seem to be in the way of that. And with the previous Tango release, the screw link coupling was fitted here and it did get in the way of the coupling. So I think it's the right decision to include those just as optional accessories now. The wheels, again, are much, much better than before. The axles are still visible, but they're not kind of shiny steel coloured anymore. They've been dulled down so that they're not dreadfully noticeable. I think that makes a massive difference. Also, the coupling and connecting rods, these have been blackened this time, which is interesting. I think I prefer that to the sort of weird, sort of washed out colour that they had before. I suppose I would prefer if they matched the rest of my locos. The rest of the engines have just a kind of shiny metallic colour to them, but these are certainly an improvement over the original model, and they are metal, I believe. I don't think these are plastic. Also, the pickup wipers on the driving wheels, these have been blackened as well so that they're not as visible from the outside of the model anymore. Again, just a small upgrade, but it makes a massive difference. Okay, let's take a look at the level of detail then. Well, it's a relatively simple model where the separately fitted parts are concerned. So we've actually looked already at most of the detail this thing has to offer. I will just show you we've got the separate cylinder drain cocks, as you can see, and a fair bit of detail around the cylinder area as well. The smoke box door is nicely detailed, as well as the handrail. We've also got the separately fitted lamp bracket and also the smoke box door handle. We've got very straightly fitted lamp brackets above the front buffer beam. That's really good to see. And there's also these little sort of bracing brackets just above the front buffer beam as well. And those are separately fitted parts which have been reasonably neatly applied. Along the running plate, we've got a few more separately fitted components which are painted as well, although between the frames there is no detail or anything like that. Again, when I heard this model was being upgraded, I thought, ooh, maybe they're going to add something in there. No, they haven't. That looks pretty much as it did before. Here is one of the new tooled aspects of the model, the cab. And yeah, I do like the shape of this. I think I prefer the Great Northern cab to the later LNER and BR cab, actually. And the cab interior has seen a bit of an upgrade. So we've got quite a bit of painted detail in here. I think the quality of the paint job here is a lot better than it was before. And quite noticeably, there is now paintwork on the gauges, which was not a thing before, at least not the sort of actual detailing on the gauges. So that's an improvement. Clearly though, this is not going to have a firebox flicker effect because there is no opening for the firebox there. As for the loco then, I think that's pretty much it for the level of detail. Oh, except we have got the pipe work which runs along the other side of the body just behind the handrail there. So yeah, nicely detailed. It's not crazy in its level of detail or anything. And like I say, I can't understand why this should command a price of nearly £190 because we've seen much, much better for that amount of money. But I think to say it's Heljan and to say how bad the previous O2 was, yeah, I'm quite impressed with this. The tender is also very, very impressive. I'm not sure whether this is a new tooled tender. I think it might be. I don't know why they would have had the Great Northern tender around before, if not. But yeah, this looks really, really good, to be fair. So decoration, just fine. The finish is about the same as the loco, and the Great Northern lettering on the side with the sort of white and black looks absolutely brilliant. Moulded detail wise, the chassis or the lower body looks great. Axle boxes, springs, great relief to these. They look fantastic. We've also got the sort of coal guard around the top. Parts of this are separately fitted, as you can see. Some decent moulding on here. Separate wire handrails. We've got some controls on the front of the tender. But I think my favourite feature of this tender is the coal load. Like I say, never seen this ready to run before. But it's like a crushed coal effect. A real sort of coal-like material, not saying it's real coal, not entirely sure, it could be though, that has been applied to the top of the tender and then set in with glue or some other sort of adhesive to make an incredibly realistic coal effect. Now, a lot of people are dissatisfied with moulded coal effects and they do this sort of thing anyway. Well, with this model, you don't have to. So that is a genuine bit of innovation from Heljan, I think. And also the coal load that used to come with these Tango models looked pretty awful. So I think that was a wise move. And then around the back of the tender, there's quite a bit of detail here. We've got separately fitted lamp brackets, another separately fitted vacuum pipe here, guard irons down below, NEM pocket into which you can fit the NEM coupling, of course, and more metal sprung buffers. In terms of the build quality, things are much, much better. I'm not seeing wonky parts, I'm not seeing visible glue. Maybe some of the detail parts have a small amount, but certainly not a lot. I think generally the fit and finish of the model is a lot better than it used to be. Like I say, not perfect. I think the biggest issue is the warped running plate. Yeah, that's just not great at this price point, is it? But apart from that, it's a great looking model, topped off, of course, with a just beautiful livery. But that's just the way the loco looks. What about performance? What about the mechanism? Have decent upgrades been made? Well, let's find out. Let's get this down onto the track. So there she is down onto the track, looking really good. I do love this grey, but unfortunately the mechanism's still not that great. I had hoped that the mechanism would have been fully revamped so that it was, quality. Unfortunately, that seems to have only partially happened. But there's good and bad in the mechanism as usual, so let's get into this. First of all, on the good side, there's a lot of pickups here. So every tender wheel has a wiper pickup going to it, and every loco driving wheel does as well. So that's, what, 7 pickups per rail? That's definitely more than adequate. They've also got a new drawbar on here, which now, as you can see, has a close coupling option so that you can couple loco and tender a bit closer if you want to. But as you can see, they've also removed the electrical connectors between loco and tender, so that now the loco and tender are sort of semi-permanently hardwired together. So that means if you want to disassemble either the loco or the tender for, let's say, chipping the thing or servicing it, it's much harder to separate the two now. So yeah, that's not brilliant. The base keeper plate, for some reason, is made up of 2 parts. So you remove the first 3 screws and then the cosmetic base keeper comes off. Then there's another 2 screws holding the pickup plate on. The pickups are hardwired, but they can kind of hinge off at the back, so you can get to those for cleaning quite easily. As you can see on the axles though, still no separate bearings. And this baffles me. How can a manufacturer charge £186 for a model that doesn't have separate bearings on it? I mean, I thought this was an industry standard feature now, but this one doesn't have it. Also, if you take a closer look at the slots in the chassis, you can see these are uniform as well. So the entire axle is going to be in contact with this slot. So the drag must be enormous here. And you can also see how rough the surface of that slot is as well. Yeah, really, really poor for such an expensive model. Body removal is relatively simple for the loco, so 2 screws, 1 at the front and 1 at the back. And I was a bit confused, but it's actually not the running plate that lifts away, it's just the upper body that lifts away. And you can see the running plate has stayed in place here, and you can also see how just flimsy it is. Yeah, really, really surprised that that is a plastic part. But anyway, you can see we've got the heavy metal chassis here, and credit where credit's due, the loco is very heavy indeed. And the motor is underneath this cover. 1 screw holds that cover on, so removing that reveals what Heljan say is the 5-pole motor, and you can see that it does indeed have dual flywheels on it. So that's good to see. Nice to see a couple of flywheels here on a steam loco. And that's all in terms of the loco chassis. No lights or special features or anything like that. It's just a motor and a gear train powering the wheels. Then for the tender, to access the DCC socket and the speaker, etc., once again it is 2 screws, and inside the tender there is the 21-pin DCC socket. Yep, that's absolutely fine, and there's also a pre-fitted speaker as promised in the instructions. I don't believe that was a feature of the original model, so that is a definite upgrade, isn't it? Then the back-to-back gauging comes in at 13.9 to 14.1 millimeters, so this is quite a bit under gauge. The standard is 14.4, usually locos are 0.1 or 0.2 millimeters below that, and that tends to produce good runners, but yeah, I would say this has gone a little bit too far, to the point where it is a little bit of a rough ride over points. Again, I don't know if they're all like this or whether it's just mine, but yeah, 13.9, that's a bit too far for my liking. So yeah, it's not a terrible mechanism, but really the lack of bearings and actually the bearing design seems really unnecessarily poor for a brand new and expensive model in 2024. I'm not too sure why Heljan have upgraded so much about this model, but they haven't upgraded the sort of basics of the mechanism. Yeah, I can't say I'm surprised, but I'm far from chuffed given how much this cost me. Anyway, I've already filmed the initial performance test and running in, so I'll jump back in time for you now and show you how that went. Right, moment of truth then. Now, looking at my last review from 6 years ago, I didn't seem to have much trouble with the performance of the Tango, so as long as this can at least match that, then, you know, hopefully the performance of this will be fine. So, forwards direction, let's see if this works at all. First ever run, here we go, turning up the knob right now. Okay, bit of a jerky start, but it is alive, that's the main thing. In reverse, up to 50%. Alright, so obviously before this is running at its best, I am going to let this run in fully, so that means 30 minutes running forwards and backwards. And yeah, it's not dreadfully smooth at the moment, so hopefully a good run in will improve that. Seems to be smooth at 50% though. Let me run by at half power just to give you a sense of the gearing and speed. Seems to be getting smoother as it goes, to be fair. Yeah, that's good. Alright, very nice. And let's go at full speed just to get a sense of the range of speeds. Here we go. Yeah, that looks like a good top speed really for a freight loco, doesn't it? And it's not too fast. So I don't know if the gearing's changed at all. I do seem to remember the old Tango running a bit faster than that, so perhaps they have geared it down a touch. But yeah, the speed and gearing seems absolutely fine regardless. Right, so obviously it might not be performing at its best at the moment, so I will try this again later on, but straight out of the box, is there any torque in this mechanism? It's quite a heavy loco, so it'll be interesting to see, up to 50%. Yeah. So that's not bad. It's obviously slowed down a bit, but it is easily able to turn its wheels. So there's torque there, that's good. Now, according to the instructions, this runs a 5-pole motor. So let's see if it's a good crawler. Again, I'll try this later on, but let's just try it for now and see. I'm turning it up slowly. Oh, let's try again. That didn't look great. Turning up even more slowly. Oh. Bit of a jump. Bit more then. It's not sustaining at that speed, is it? Alright, so there we go. It seems to be about the slowest I can make it run at the moment, and it's obviously quite jerky. But again, like I say, hopefully... Ooh. Yeah, okay. Hands off the controller. Just to show. Yeah, that's struggling quite a bit, isn't it? Seems to be a bit sticky where the rods are now, but then when they get to sort of 180 degrees from there, they seem to free up and go a bit quicker. Let's see if it'll do that again with the next rotation. Come on, let's help it on a bit. Seems to free up somewhere here and then suddenly go. Let's see if it'll do that again. Try and ease it past. There we go. Fingers here, just to show I'm not touching the controller. So yeah, I think running in is definitely needed with this. That's not a brilliant performer at the moment, and you'd certainly expect better for the best part of £190, wouldn't you? But yeah, it's certainly not bad. It seems to be nice and reliable. It's not been cutting out or anything, and there is some torque there. It's just, yeah, for a freight loco, you'd want it to be able to do a crawl when you need it to. Anyway, let's just try a crawl in reverse. So again, quite coggy, quite a jerky motion, really. Yeah, very, very jerky. Okay, so yeah, there's room for improvement, shall we say. Yeah, even at that speed, it's jerky. You can hear it jerking. Oh. And inconsistent. Like I say, when it's sped up there, I wasn't actually touching the controller. Yep, there we go, it does it again. Okay, so running in, very much needed. Let's go for 50% then and see how it gets on around the track. Here we go. Half power. Okay. It did seem to slow down a little bit on the third radius there. No, fourth radius. Here's the second radius. Right. So yeah, I think at the moment, before it's fully run in, I would say inconsistent is the word. Even on the straight track, at the slower speeds, it's pretty inconsistent, and it also seems as though the curves are causing this to slow down quite a bit as well. Now, this may improve after running in, we'll find out, and obviously it might not do this if you were running on DCC, but I'm testing this on analog in the same way that I test basically every loco I review, at least the ones that come without a decoder. So it should be able to do this without slowing down if it's as good as some of the other locos I've got. But yeah, it's working, we'll say that. It does look lovely as it runs along on the straights without slowing down. You know, it's a good looking model, that's for sure. But hopefully it will improve as I run it in. So we'll see whether or not it does. I'll be back in a little while and we'll do some more testing. Alright, we've had the first failure, which was impressively, or is that depressingly soon? Yeah, the thing derailed. I thought, oh, here we go. yeah, it shed its front pony, so I guess I'll just put it back on. I'm hoping that this is not one of those irritating jobs where you can't screw it in all the way because it seizes up, and that's why it's sort of come loose, because it's had to be run untightened. So I'm going to put it back on. Hopefully I will be able to tighten this screw all the way without the front pony locking up. If I can't, then that's really annoying and naff. Have I got that on the right way? Yes. Okay. Tighten fully. For goodness sake, Heljan. Yeah. So when it's fully tightened, the thing can't move. Goodness sake. So that's why it came loose, because it's got to, the screw's got to be left loose in order for the thing to move. It is depressing, isn't it, frankly, because I am giving this the fairest possible chance here. It's just basics. It is just basics. How can manufacturers not get the basics right? I just don't get it. Okay, so that's going to happen again. I suppose then what I'll have to do is put some glue on that screw eventually so that it doesn't come unscrewed. But why should I have to do that? That is so annoying. Right, so if it comes off again, we're going to be finishing the review with this ponyless, because I am not spending the rest of today repeatedly reaffixing this front pony. Not impressed now. I'm trying to be patient today, but that is pushing things. All right, there we go. I've got a glazed smile etched on my face now, because that was not enjoyable. Yeah, a disaster, really, a real disaster. It has improved slightly in terms of its sort of reliability and consistency, but it is still slowing down on those second radius curves and even broader curves than that. Now, whenever I mention that, there's always a few comments blaming my track or my controller or something. So here is a similar 280, a Hornby one, running on the same track, the same controller. It's the same day, I just did this a few minutes ago. As you can see, no such slowing down. So it is the loco and not the setup. Lots of derailments as well. Against my better judgment, I decided to keep the front pony on, and during the 1 hour's running in, the thing dropped off and caused a derailment 3 times. So if you do the maths, that's every 20 minutes this loco is failing and needing attention. Now, call me Mr. Gresley, if you will, but having to stop play every 20 minutes for a locomotive failure is not exactly acceptable, is it? So what I will do after the review is just sort of glue that screw in the right position so that it doesn't keep coming out. But that's not ideal, is it? Because of course, if something else goes wrong with the model and I have to send it back and it comes to light that I've modified it by putting glue on parts, then the retailer would be well within their rights not to accept a return. So yeah, it's not ideal, is it? Really better if the manufacturer can sort these issues rather than leaving it for the customer. Now, I've done a bit of digging on that subject. The screw that has been used on this model is different from the screw used in my original Heljan Tango. The original screw was much longer so that you could screw it in all the way and it still leaves the pony loose. With this one, the screw is shorter so that if you screw it in all the way, the front pony is tight. So I don't know whether the factory just used the wrong screw on my model and the others are fine, but I should point out that the bogie was not stiff and tight when I first started running this, so whoever assembled it did know to leave the screw loose, which is interesting, isn't it? But yeah, that screw needed to have at least a shoulder on it or something like that, or it should have been the correct length so that this issue didn't become a problem. It also derailed for reasons unrelated to the front pony, and I suspect that the reason is there's not enough play between the loco and the tender. So on parts of the track that are perhaps not perfectly level or where you've got an incline, the tender has a tendency to lift the rear drivers off the track. Now, I've fixed this by bending the drawbar slightly so that I can lift the tender a slight amount without the rear wheels coming off. As you can see, I can't lift it far, but it has stopped derailing for that reason now. But yeah, for a brand new, super expensive model, this has not been straightforward, and the issues are going to continue because at this point I've not glued that front pony yet, because I review models as they come. I'm not here to fix models and then review my repair job. That's not how a review is supposed to work. But anyway, let's see if the crawl's any better, because it was, frankly, let's be honest here, shoddy. I've been trying to be positive about this, but let's be honest, it's still a rip-off, isn't it? It's still not much good. So it is smoother now, I would say. Somehow still inconsistent though, it still sort of jumps in speed, but yeah, it's not unacceptable, that. Right, before we test the crawl, let's see if the half speed is any faster or slower than before. That's 50. No, it's still sensible. Yeah, so nothing wrong with the gearing. I quite like that. And it does look good as it runs, of course. Torque, let's check that again. 50%. Yeah, it's fine. It's able to turn its wheels, so it's not too underpowered or anything. And finally, the crawl, let's give that a go. Turning it up very slowly. Please be less coggy. Still turning up. Still turning up. For goodness sake. Let's try again. I did that really slowly and it still jumped to life at high speed. There we go. A bit more. Yeah, it's not smooth or particularly slow, is it? In fact, let's give it a nudge. So it's fully run in now, so there's no excuse for it to be sort of binding up like that. I have to say, my original Tango runs slightly better than this, and that's after it's sort of been through a paddling pool of water. I kid you not. The Loco was so bad that I used it for all sorts of experiments, and it still runs better than this one does. Maybe this will improve with time, but yeah, this one's just, it's not going in reverse, is it? Let's turn it up a bit more. Yeah. You know, I've experienced a lot of Locos. People might like to say I don't know what I'm talking about, and maybe they're right, but I have tested a lot of Locos. I test them consistently on exactly the same setup every single time. I know what a good runner is. I know what a good Loco is capable of. I have seen so many Locos that can do better than this. Better crawls, better torque, better performance, not falling apart on the track every 20 minutes. I mean, these things are not luxuries, are they? Basic good running should be the bare minimum, particularly at this price. So, actually, yeah, this is no good. Look at that. And I'm starting to lose my patience now, because Heljan had a lot of feedback on these models. It wasn't just me that thought the Tango was naff. You know, they had an opportunity here to fix it. What's wrong with retooling it entirely and doing the job properly? Because it seems like they've fixed a few things. Oh, can we fix this? Yeah, all right, let's leave the rest of it as the shoddy model that it used to be. Well, I'm not impressed, because I paid a lot of money for this, and it feels like, once again, I'm just funding a company that can't be bothered to get the basics right. The basics? And at this kind of price, it should have more than the basics, but it doesn't even have that. I don't know. It's such a shame, because it is beautiful looking now. They have at least fixed the looks of the thing, but it's still not quite right, is it? Still not quite right. Anyway, let's get this over and done with then. So the tractive effort came in at 0.42 newtons, which actually wasn't too bad. That should be about 26 coaches on straight and level track. Yeah, for a pre-grouping freight locomotive, I think that's perfectly okay. So I've set up a reasonably lengthy train of freight here, not too much, but enough certainly to test what this thing can do. So let's back it up and let's try the couplings. Here we go. Come on, please be consistent. I have to turn it up. And as you can see, I've popped the NEM coupling that came with this into the pocket. Once again though, this isn't quite right. They've had to use the stepped coupling because the NEM pocket is at the wrong height. So using the couplings provided, that's absolutely fine, but if you want to use a NEM pocket for its intended purpose and fit a different sort of coupling into there, well, it's going to be at the wrong height unless you can find a stepped one. So again, we've got a manufacturer here defeating the object of having what is supposed to be a standard NEM pocket. But anyway, she's coupled to the train. I am really torn about this because I think it looks beautiful. It does look so much better. I've enjoyed looking at this so much more than the last Tango. The last Tango. But it's still not an enjoyable Loco to run because of the way it performs. Anyway, let's see how it gets on with a load. Oh, a bit better at starting slowly when it's got a bit of a load holding it back. And let's go up to 50%, otherwise it will grind to a halt, I'm sure. There it goes. So on the straight, as you can see, hauling this train quite nicely. Right, so on the middle line, against my better judgment, I've got the original Tango model that I bought, which has been through a lot with me because, like I say, I use it in all my experiments. But despite all of that, I still think this is a slightly better runner. And I don't know if I can get it to crawl. To be fair, it's still quite coggy, isn't it? But that's smooth. Smoothish. But anyway, yeah, the fact that it works, frankly, is a miracle after running underwater like it did all those years ago, and the screws on it are a little bit rusty. And then on the inside line, we have what I think is a much better example of a sort of LNER region 280. It is the Hornby Thompson 01, which is far more nicely made, I would say. It's got a better mechanism, better level of detail, and it was far, far cheaper to boot. So yeah, if you're looking for a sort of 280 that matches this region, that's probably the one I'd recommend because it is better. But anyway, let's see how the Tango gets on around the track with a load. Right, here we go. Let's see if it's going to slow down. In fact, I've not showed you it slowing down since I ran it in. But there you go. You can see, like clockwork, still slowing down around the second radius there. And I'm not entirely sure exactly what's causing that. I mean, it could be a lack of torque, but as we saw during the torque test, it's got a reasonably powerful motor. I mean, it could be something to do with the drawbar, not entirely sure. Could be the fact that the gauging's off. Yeah, there's a lot of things that it could be, but regardless, on my setup, it does slow down quite dramatically on those curves. And just to demonstrate that it's nothing to do with my setup and that it is the loco, let me run the same train at the same power setting with that Hornby 2800 again. Right, so here it is, same power setting. You can see how much more lively it is. Any slowing down, I wonder? No. So just again to reiterate, it's not the track, it's not the controller, it's the loco. And to the people who say I need DCC to stop the slowdowns, no, I need a decent loco because this one's decent and it does a great, great job. And here we are again with the Tango. Yeah, I suppose it does seem a lot more sluggish, doesn't it? Speeds up noticeably on the straight and then tanks again on the curves before speeding up on the straight again. So maybe it is a torque thing then, I don't know. So let's try and start summarising this then. So it doesn't look terrible. I think the way the model looks is probably one of its strongest aspects. It's not perfect visually because I've pointed out several issues, but yeah, on the whole I would say this is now an acceptable looking model. Performance wise, yeah, I think this is the area that lets the model down the most. It's not a diabolical performer, and I've certainly seen worse, but yeah, it's not really performing the way I would expect such an expensive model to perform. I think at this sort of price, and just in this day and age, frankly, I'd expect a freight loco that can crawl decently and smoothly. I'd expect it to get around second radius curves without slowing right down. I'd expect it to be able to run for more than 20 minutes without shedding the front pony. And I wouldn't expect to have to make modifications to the drawbar in order to stop it derailing because there's not enough play between the loco and tender. So I think ultimately this so-called upgrade is a bit like putting lipstick on a pig, isn't it? Yes, they've upgraded some things, and putting lipstick on here and there has been able to hide certain things, and you know, improvements to the finish and the way these have been assembled certainly has made the model better in some respects, but I think ultimately just a complete retool was in order. You know, a new chassis, a new mechanism, added features. I think perhaps then, provided it was done to a satisfactory standard, then it might be worth £180 to £190. As it is though, could I recommend this? No, I don't think I could. It's a great looking model, so it's a shame to say that, but you know, we've seen everything this has to offer now. It's just not worth it, is it? And let's be honest, let's remember what happened the last time Heljan produced these Tangos. They were very expensive, they didn't sell out, the retailers ended up discounting them massively, and I was able to buy mine for sort of £89. I don't really see what would have changed this time, to mean that that isn't going to happen again. I mean, maybe they've learned and not produced as many, but either way, this is not a model that I can see people running out and sort of queuing up to buy. I don't see any reason why in another year's time or so these won't have come down in price. Will they be £89? I don't know. But yeah, I would say, as usual with a lot of Heljan stuff, just wait. I'm sure the prices will come down. Otherwise, I think my advice would just to be leave it, wait for the sales, and then you might be able to pay what this model is worth. Let's have some ratings then for Heljan's upgraded Class O2 Tango. And yeah, as you can see, the ratings here still not great. It's not as bad as it used to be, but still, when you think about what else is available in this day and age for this amount of money or less, it's still not a great prospect, I think. Level of detail though, I've given a pretty good score of 4-star. Yeah, this is a miles better looking model than it used to be. Much nicer finish. We've got improvements to the interior cab detail, which is great. We've got screw-link couplings provided that you can fit if you want to. The sprung buffers are great, and the coal load is very, very convincing. Yeah, the detail is great. It does lose a star though for the lack of firebox flicker. Most modern locos of this sort of price do have that feature, and the glazing on the front of the cab is really poor. The fact that it's not transparent makes that glazing a fundamental failure, if you ask me, but otherwise, yeah, the detail's great. Performance, yeah, not so much. I suppose the gearing is pretty good, and on most straight sections of track, it is absolutely fine. But it does derail quite a bit, either because the front pony isn't fitted properly. In fact, I think it's got the wrong screw, because the front pony screw on my older Tango doesn't behave like that. It's got a longer screw which you can screw in all of the way, and the front pony is free to move. With this one, you have to loosen that screw a little bit, otherwise the pony loses its motion entirely. That means, of course, that as the loco runs, that screw works its way out and eventually causes derailments. It also derailed a few times, I think, because of the lack of play between the loco and tender, so I've had to adjust the drawbar, and now it seems okay on that front, but yeah, still not great. It can't crawl for a freight loco, that's not the best. Yeah, at the slow speeds it's very coggy and it's just not smooth at all. I mean, you could overlook this if it was a cheaply sold model, but this is so expensive, it needs to perform like the very best of them do. And also it slows down quite dramatically on the curves, and as I've demonstrated, that is not normal. I do have 2.8.0 locos that can handle this track without slowing down like that, so that's not brilliant. The pulling power was fine though, 0.42 newtons or 26 coaches on straight and level track. That's pretty decent, I would say, and there is enough torque in the mechanism at least so that it can haul a decent load. So pulling power, not a problem. Mechanism then, I think it deserves a middle of the road score of 3-star. I mean, the motor seems to be pretty good, I would say. I like the dual flywheels. There have been improvements to this. It now has a pre-fitted speaker, for instance, plus it's fairly serviceable as well. You can access the pickups and the axles and the motor for cleaning and servicing without too many problems. But on the downside, we've got that screw for the front pony, which was not fit for purpose. We've got the lack of bearings on the driving axles. Again, at this price point, that is unacceptable to me. And the massive contact area between the axles and the so-called bearings means that there's going to be a lot of drag in this mechanism. Also, they've done away with the connectors, the electrical connectors between the loco and tender, which means you can't easily separate loco and tender, making it much harder to work on them for DCC fitting or perhaps lubricating the motor, that sort of thing. So yeah, not the greatest mechanism. I have seen worse, but again, for how much this cost, I think it could have been better. Quality then, I've given the same score, 3 stars. Yeah, there is a noticeable improvement in the quality of this model over the original Tango that I looked at. So no visible glue, at least no massive fingerprints that I saw. No missing parts, and I didn't really see any wonky parts either, so that's good. On the downside though, it's got a plastic body still with a running plate that does not sit straight. One of my pet hates, that is. I think expensive models should at least be presented properly. It's also got pretty poor moulding quality in places, particularly in areas around the glazing, like I've mentioned, and around the chimney as well. Again, this was such an expensive model, it just wasn't presented to an acceptable standard. That brings us on to value for money then, which I think unfortunately was very poor for this model. I ended up paying just £89 for my original Tango, which was a lot of money for what it was, but at least it was relatively affordable. Now the full RRP is £219, with your typical retailer price coming in at about £186. I think that is far too much money, farcically too much money for what you get here. Poor value generally, and the model is unnecessarily cheaply produced, I think. For that amount of money, I would expect a firebox flicker, I would expect at the very least a die-cast running plate, I'd want a better quality mechanism that does have the bearings, and I'd expect more development to have gone into the model to make sure that things like the front pony were functioning as they should, and that the loco to tender drawbar has enough play in it so as not to cause derailments. I feel like this is very basic stuff that was wrong on a very expensive model. So overall then, that is a score of 6.13 out of 10, which is a fail, unfortunately. Yeah, it's better than it was, but it's still not great, and given how much it cost, I just don't think I could recommend this to you. So into the logbook it goes, where it's pretty close to the bottom, 43rd place, above Hornby's S&DJR 4F and below their faulty Black 5. I think if you've got a lot of money to burn and you particularly want to own a Great Northern version of this model, then yeah, I suppose you could pick this up, because at the very least with some tinkering it is functional and it's certainly better looking now. But if you're the sort of person that would only want a model if it was super high quality, very well made, got all the modern bells and whistles, is good value and is likely to last for a good long time, then I just wouldn't recommend this, assuming the other models in this batch are similar to mine. Right, I suppose I should try and answer the question that the video title posed. Is this model still terrible? Well, I'm starting with well. It's less terrible than it used to be, I think. Certainly where the model's looks are concerned, this is closer to acceptable now. I'm still not entirely sure it is acceptable. I mean, the warped running plate, windows that you couldn't see through, I mean, these do break the illusion, unfortunately. But certainly where the sort of assembly quality is concerned, this is a lot better. In terms of performance though, yeah, this is not performing the way you would want a high quality modern loco to run. So I think all things considered, this is still pretty much in terrible territory, isn't it? Not to the extent it used to be, but it's still not good enough that I would recommend spending nearly £200 on it. So yeah, that's what I think. I'm glad I did this. I did enjoy looking at this. I certainly do enjoy it more than the old Tango, but you know, I just think about all the other locos that are available for £190 or less, and I just think if I was recommending just one to somebody, we'd go through quite a lot of locos before I recommended this one. Let's just put it that way. But yeah, I think we'll leave it there. Thank you so much for watching. I apologise for any disappointment. Well, it's not my fault. I'm just being honest, haven't I? As usual. Do let me know what you think about this though. Have I been too harsh, or do you think I got it right? Do let me know what you think. But for now, I think we will just leave that one there. Thank you once again for watching. Affiliate links in the description if you would like to give one of these a try. I mean, I don't know that I recommend it, but if you want to buy one, you might as well use my link and help me out. So thank you for that if you do. But yeah, I think we'll leave that one there. Another review coming very soon, hopefully, so I'll see you for that one. For now though, you take care and I'll catch you on the next one. Alright, cheers folks, see you soon.